Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning.
How was your 4th of July?
Good. Yeah,
It's
it's
like-
like the hill on fire again.
It was like
rather hilarious.
a war. It was like a war zone over our house. Man.
Well, if you've ever been to my house, one of the things that you noticed was the archery range and the backboard I had so we wouldn't inadvertently stick a horse or something like that. Dad, I hadn't been upstairs yet that day, and Dad called me, and he was very calm. And he goes, "Well, I just called you to let you know that the archery range backdrop is on fire." I said, "It's what?"
What?
He said, "Yeah, it's on fire." I said, "Like with flames?" He goes, "Yeah."
No, like,
Fire!
That's what fire is, you know? Yeah.
And I said, "Well, did you call the fire department?" "No." Yeah. And I said, "Well, can you get a hose over there?" And he said, "That's what I'm doing now. I'm trying to take loose this sprinkler head from the hose," and it wasn't going. Stanley's the only guy I know who can stay calm through something like that when he's getting frustrated because
Right.
the damn sprinkler will come off the end of the hose and we got this fire going and, you know. But he did get the end off of the sprinkler off of it, and he did put it out with just our pressure at the back of the house is not very good. So it's just kind of like
Right.
spitting on it, you know. But he got it out, and then about 30 minutes later, we had another flare up. And I think it was the hay bales that time because it's very hard to put out a hay bale because it's so compact, you know. Do you have a picture of it up there? Oh, no. But yeah, it burned about half of the backdrop, so thank you, Father. It didn't get any worse than that,
Right.
And one of the things that, like we were talking about during prayer request, is the hill country, Texas hill country. I've deer hunted through there a lot. But there's a lot of campgrounds down in that area. And so it's just horrible what's happened. But it brings up something I want to talk about today, and that is counting the cost. How many know that all those children and the counselors, when they left to go to camp, how many know they totally expected to come home?
Boy.
It's just like this leg situation. When I finally got home, I looked at Stanley and I said, "Thank you for, keeping everything going." When I went to the doctor's, I had a doctor's appointment that day, and I said, when I went to the doctor's appointment, I had no idea it was going to take me 6 months to get back home.
Right.
Those things just come upon you so quickly. And I wonder how many people really count the cost. In Texas, there was a busload of youth going to youth camp and they had a horrible bus accident and killed a lot of the kids on the bus, and killed the driver too, I believe. But when those parents put their kids on the bus to go to church camp, they totally thought they would get them back. You got to count the cost. In Scripture, we talk about that in Luke 14.
Yeah, Luke 14, it should be 25 to 30, not 31. My bad. Now great multitudes went with him, and he turned and he said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it? Lest, after he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. That's the end.
That's the end.
That's where you wanted to stop, but I can go this.
Yeah, go.
Sorry, my bad. Or what king going to make war against another king does not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is still a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks conditions of peace. So likewise, whoever of you does not forsake all that he has cannot be my disciple.
You know, none of us knew that or really considered the depth of that, counting the cost. One of the huge lies that churchianity brings to us is that salvation is free. It's a free gift. But how many know that it's not really free? We pay for that by dying to self. Galatians 2:20, for I have been crucified with Christ, and it is no longer I that live, but he lives on in me. It costs you your self-identity, basically. It's not a free gift. It's a free gift in the fact that money doesn't play a part in it. And so we're all equal, but it does cost. Just like the parable with the rich young ruler. Do you remember that? And he said, I have done all these, talking about the commands. What else must I do? And you should have looked at him knowing that he hadn't followed the commands, because if he had followed the commands, he wouldn't have these empires of sacredness inside of him, like his finances, all these possessions. Yeshua said, take all of that, sell your stuff, give the money to the poor, and then what? Come and follow me. Could he do it? No, he just turned around shaking his head. Can't do it. These children, And I pray for their families and I pray for them, but chances are, being lost this long, it's now a recovery mission.
For the most part, yes. There may be a miracle that you have in there.
There may be, yeah.
For the most part, it's
None of them considered going to camp. They may not come home. And I think all too often, we don't count the cost either. Because we all have our sacred cows, so to speak. Those strongholds that we're just not ready to give up yet. There's an Emmaus talk called Priorities, and the talk ends up with, what do you think about how you spend your money and how you spend your time? Those things are your priorities. And it's just interesting because when I, in Texas, would counsel people, believers and secular people alike, I would ask them, make me a list of your priorities. And those things are anything that draws energy away from you in the course of a day. And they would come back with this nice little 5-point list. And I'd tell them to go back and really do it this time. Because the first time around, nobody ever really does it because it involves looking into yourself. It's like Yom Kippur. People don't really want to do that.
Scary.
But the second time around, it would be more comprehensive. And I noticed one thing in all of it.
never probably did they put God as the number one spot.
They always put Yahweh as the number one spot. And they never listed themselves in that list of priorities.
They did put God. I was going to say, I think none of them put God in that top spot.
Yeah, oh yeah, because they knew, most of them knew
Oh,
how to
okay.
pass.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you
They're doing it to
fill
look
it
good.
out.
Yeah.
You filled it out to please the pastor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, it was very interesting. And I would tell them, why don't you list yourself? Because most people have a bad self-image, or they lack confidence in their self-image. And they would say, well, I don't really matter. And it's like, ooh. Do you realize that, number one, we're all called to be priests and kings? So we all have a role in the kingdom. It's not just clergy. That means you got to be a priority to take care of yourself so you don't fall apart in the heat of battle. It's kind of like football practice. When I played football, we would come back from a summer break early to do what was called two-a-days. And two-a-days was really a synonym. It was really hell.
Right.
In two-a-days, they ran you till you puked, and they give you time to puke and get yourself together, and then let's go back to running. They pushed us to the very limit and beyond of what we thought we could do. Why? Because in a game, they didn't need us falling apart with cramps or heat exhaustion. We've already been to hell, so, you know, Texas heat ain't much comparatively. Well, Yahweh does that too. It's not just a football thing. We all knew 2 days was coming. We didn't think about it. We never stayed in shape during what summer break we had. We abused ourselves, and alcohol may or may not have been involved. It definitely was involved.
Sleep deprivation. Yeah.
But Yahweh tells us to count the cost. What is the cost?
Like you said, it's self, it's cost is everything.
Yeah. You know, it's funny because most people have maybe not a bad self-image. Maybe it's just kind of neutral, but there are those people that really do have a bad self-image.
A lot of
Yeah. And a lot of them we don't know about.
perfect example would be Tony. I mean, that the whole core of Tony's problem all those years was that he was just convinced he was worthless because that's what his mom taught him. You know, oh, you're not smart enough. You'll never be able to do this. You're not smart enough. You're not, you know. Grew up thinking he was stupid. You know, no matter what anybody else said to him, his mom had that ingrained. And that bad self-image is what sent him down all those roads.
Yep, and sadly, she probably had that in herself,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
she projects that on somebody else to make herself
She
feel
hated
better.
my guts because I wasn't, you know, screwed up. So she did her best to make me that way. She did for a long time, but
Right?
You didn't receive it, so you didn't take it on.
oh, I did for a long time. It took me a long time to shed it. The only reason I was able to is I had other people in my life that counteracted that.
And that's what young kids face today, you know, especially with internet and internet bullying, because these are kids, insecurity. And
Right.
if I can tear you down, that makes me better, doesn't
Right.
it? Yeah.
Verse 25 says in Luke 14, I'm sure. Now a great multitude went with him, and he turned and said to them. Why is the multitude following him that way?
They want him to heal. They want him to perform miracles. They want him to.
Yeah. Nobody ever talked about accountability.
Right.
What mikvah really meant. They didn't tell us to count the cost, you know, and I think back in all my years in church, and I was part of this, nobody ever gave a sermon on counting the cost. How come?
Because it doesn't put money in the plate. People don't want to hear that this is going to be hard, and it's going to be painful, and it's going to be, at times discouraging, at times feeling deserted, hearing his voice, and then worse than that, not hearing his voice. And because people don't want to hear that. They want to hear that they can say a 16-second prayer and everything's hunky-dory, and, you know, put 10 digit in, baby. And, you know, that's why they don't do it, because people will walk out the door. The hell with this, I'm exiting stage left, you know.
And Yeshua speaks to that. He says, if anyone comes to me and does not, now listen, this was hard for me. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and his own life also, he cannot be counted as my disciple. That's hard.
And it's hard to understand too, because in other scripture, he talks about the penalty of my father and my father and my mother.
Right.
You know, the relationship we're supposed to have with our family and our brothers and our sisters, and how we're supposed to, cherish our wives. So I've never understood this, to be quite honest with you. You know what I mean? It seems like it's in conflict. I'm sure it's not, but when you read it, it sure seems like it's in conflict to other commands.
Absolutely. Let's take a look at the interlinear.
What does hate mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
Look at hate.
Yes, you're right there, aren't you?
Because hate's a verb, right?
To love less. Now that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. The first definition is to detest. By extension, to love less. And I think what he's saying is the love, and I think this is what Richard was talking about, the love that you have for your family needs to be less than your love for Yahweh. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
In other words, you don't let things come and distract you from what Yahweh has for you. Because sometimes it's two-a-days. Run until you puke. Because he is shaping you to be his disciple and to be Christ-like. That is the most important thing. So, as much as you love your family,
You need to love the Father more.
you need to love the Father more.
That makes a lot more sense. I've never did look that up. I should, see it's all help. Like, I don't understand this. What does this mean?
Just
Light bulb
skip it.
on it.
Just skip it. Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
And then in verse 27, he says, and whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Let's take a look at the cross there. A stake or a post as set upright, a pole or a cross, as an instrument of capital punishment, figuratively exposure to death, self-denial, and by implication, the atonement of Christ. They don't say this, but he shed blood on Calvary. That cross was really heavy, if you remember the scriptures describing the flogging, and then he had to carry his own cross, but he fell because he had a lot of the meat on his back ripped off with the cat of nine tails. He had a lot of muscle loss. And finally, Simon the Cyrene came and helped him. bear this cross.
Hey, Tom, real quick. I was just reading down at 47:16. That makes a lot of sense to me as well. Down there at the bottom, to impale on the cross, figure to extinguish passion of selfishness.
I wonder how many of us carry our own cross. We bear our own cross. In the generation that is starting to mature, the generation of everybody gets a ribbon, and the generation of timeout, I don't think they can carry the cross. Maybe they can. Maybe there's a few of them that do. But of us older people, we don't do such a good job carrying our own cross.
But I think there's a distinction too. He's talking about carrying your cross, but not making your cross your Elohim. That's what you're because so many people have run their self-hurt, all the things that they're made of, all the bad stuff, my mom hurt me, my dad hurt me, that's their flag, that's their whole identity. And that's not what he's saying here. He's not saying make the cross your identity. You just have to carry it.
You gotta learn how to step through that, and carry that burden with you,
carry the burden.
and not let it
you become it.
Yeah.
Don't let it define you.
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
What's that?
Walter said define you. I was like, yeah, that's a better way to say it.
You're right, because a lot of people are just, they take that hurt and that martyrdom and just hug it to them like,
Right.
instead of turning it loose and just saying, shit happened to make me a better person, now I'm gonna move on,
And I think we've made it worse in that generation where everybody gets a ribbon. Because now everybody's hurt by something, everybody's offended by something, and that becomes the identity. Because we've taught everybody needs counseling, which we all may need counseling, but
I know I could use.
I know I need to be on the sofa somewhere, but it's not counseling for healing though.
No, it's counseling
It's
to
counseling,
nurture
yes,
their,
to nurture their
woundedness,
hurt
yes,
and give them justification for the hurt.
right.
So
Yeah, no, that's a very sad thing. A couple things come to mind there. I was out doing karaoke Friday night with Brewers, and this young man that's been coming in there for 6-7 months, I know at one point I talked to him, he had just turned 21, this and that, the other. We're outside just BSing and talking about a couple things, and he said a few things, and I'm like, oh, that's a little different. And then he went, I don't remember how it came up, but he said, well, it makes it kind of hard because, I don't eat pork just because of my own personal beliefs. I went, you Messianic Hebrew or something? He said, well, I normally just tell people Jewish because that's what they understand. Yeah, Hebrew. He's a 21-year-old kid, and you know what I mean? He's a farrier. So there are those out there that are stepping through that in that generation, And as I was talking to him, and I was thinking about it later, it kind of gave me an epiphany. I don't think that there will come a point in time when this generation will have to walk through enough fire that they'll figure this stuff out. It's just going to be a heck of a lot more painful for them because as parents, they have been failed, or as children, their parents have failed. Doesn't mean that they're going to be worthless forever, but there's really, really harsh lessons coming for them that they're not prepared to handle, like I said. They'll either figure it out or die, one of the two, you know what I mean? And I think that most part of them will figure it out, but it's going to be a tough road home.
Well, you think of the ancients, all those, I'm going to say, wonderful plagues that he sent upon Egypt, they all saw that. They got hit with a few of the plagues, but not all of them.
Right.
And wherever there was blood on the doorpost, that got passed over. But that generation also saw manna, water from a rock. They saw the ground open up and swallow 23,000 people. So they knew, they saw things firsthand, but when it came down to it, and their opposition were giants, they folded.
Yeah.
Because that's what they knew. They knew about giving up. They knew the self-image of a slave very well. And so they folded, and Yahweh had to send the next generation into the promised land.
And I think one of the big things where it talks about describing that word, the exposure to death and the self-denial. So when there's something you really want to do, and you got to turn and say, no, I can't do that, you feel that little part of you go, and that's, I think, one of the big things that is hard for people. I mean, even grew up with Amanda and I in our generation, is at that point, parents were trying their darndest to give the kid everything that they wanted. And a lot of kids didn't hear, no, you can't do that. Like at my house, the kids hear that all the time. Nope, can't do that.
The first time they hear it like this, the second time they hear it like that.
And you're like, oh, that's just not what's going to happen, you know? And even the exposure to death, like we talk about all the kids playing screen time and everything on the phone all the time. Our kids, man, they play. I remember looking outside, it was like 2 years ago, actually, I guess. And these kids are wearing their coats, riding bikes in January. Our kids are. Not sitting inside in the warmth of the house. They come inside, their cheeks purple and everything. Just that, learning that, or it kept running through my head too, when we got stuck, when we was out hunting, me and the two boys get stuck in the truck, and they're like, what are we gonna do? I said, well, we ain't gonna stay here and die, so we're gonna start digging. And we're gonna figure it out as we go. Just that idea that, for physical sense, those things aren't happening, so people can't apply that to the spiritual sense of the denying of self and the going through. I might be exposed to this, but if the Father has plans for me, I'm not going to die through this, even though I feel it inside. I'm going to get through this onto the next thing that He has planned for me. And if you never get that in the physical sense of anybody saying, you know, it's time for dinner, well, I want a cookie, and you say, you can't have the damn cookie, you're going to eat dinner. Even that little thing right there, if you never have to walk through those things, you have nothing to apply that to. And we're not making our kids, making them, because they don't want to neither. We don't want to neither. But you have to teach them at a young age, otherwise they'll never know how to do it when they grow up, because they've never had to. And they're like, why should I tell myself no?
Right.
That feels bad. That feels achy. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, and you know, one thing I told my daughter, she was the essence of rebellion. But I told her, I said, you know, when I ground you from volleyball or basketball, I'm grounding me too. Because now I don't get to go see you play in a sport. I can't see that because I'm grounded along with you. And I think we don't get that either. It's the same thing that Yahweh's telling us is, yeah, I get it. You know, I had to lose Yeshua, got him back, but for those few moments on the cross, when he became sin, I had to turn my back. And so Yahweh knows of sacrifice.
That's what I was thinking of. What did Yeshua's cross represent that he had to bear, that he had to carry? And a bit of that was the walk of faith for him through the fire too, that he had to step in faith and know, yeah, I'm going to be separated from the Father, but He's going to raise me from the dead again. And so to have that going into it, And when we talk about that the cross was a painful death, but many people face painful deaths throughout time. So that wasn't the sacrifice. It was really that separation from him and the Father. And he had to face that and walk through it. So I think for us, it's the same thing. We have to face this life, walk through it, carry it, even for the faith of we're going to have a resurrection too. We're going to be with him as well. There's a purpose to the fire.
And you know, I think that when people start to wrap their head around this mentality, they make another huge mistake as well. Because it's very easy to look at these concepts and go, well, I guess this means that my life is over. And that's not the case. He tells us also in Scripture to live abundantly. Absolutely. Grab hold of this life and live it to the fullest. But you gotta do so with him as your primary target. And people miss that part when they step into this. It's just like, they quit living. And that's absolutely a sin as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why one of my favorite pictures of Yeshua is him laughing. You know, when
Like
he
say a belly laugh.
Yeah, because the creator of all life didn't do that because he hated life.
Right.
And he had a sense of humor as well, you know. So we need to count the cost, but there's a balance because, like we were saying, like CR and Alcoholics Anonymous and all these recovery groups, usually our wound becomes, or our addiction becomes, our identity. And it can go that way. If you just take the Luke 14 scriptures and focus on yourself and, you know, really die to self and do all these things at Yom Kippur, and throughout that time, it's not balanced out. And remember the narrow path is always the path between the two extremes. That is the narrow path. That's why on the Mount of Transfiguration there was Moshe, Eliyahu, and Yeshua. Moshe was the Torah. Eliyahu was the prophet, the Holy Spirit representative. And then there was Yeshua, and as they're mentioned, he's the middle one. Because he is the narrow path. He is the balance. So I always tell people, look for the balance. Look for the balance. So we got Luke 14, 25 through 30 on one side, and then Luke 12, 6 and 7, but the focus point is Romans 12, 3. You want to read that for us?
For I say through the grace given to me, to everyone who is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, as God has dealt to each one a measure of faith.
So what does it mean to think of yourself soberly? Does that mean not drinking the beer? What does that mean?
Realistically?
What did the word mean?
Soberly means
Clear-headed.
clearly, in realistic terms.
Let's look at that.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah, and on the computer.
You can edit that out.
Oh no, we can't.
Are you having a stroke over there on the keyboard?
Must be. You want me
It
to
went
say
back
it?
to Luke for some reason.
Oh, Pastor. I was like, Silverly isn't even in there.
And it may not be.
It is, yeah. Isn't it funny, it's two different words? Yeah.
Preposition to go or go into, indicating a point reached or entered, a place, time, or purpose.
Let's look at the other one, 4993, because I don't understand 15. There you go, I like that one better.
Yeah, and that is weird because it's there twice, so
Yeah,
it's two different
it's
words.
two different words.
That's used, yeah.
That happens a lot, actually. Not just in the New Testament, but in the Old Testament as well. Yeah. To be of sound mind, be sane. That leaves most of us out. But
I think what he's saying there though is look at yourself without the rose-colored glasses. Look at yourself realistically with all the freckles and moles and spots and then assess where you need to be from that perspective. Because if you look at yourself through those rose-colored glasses, either A, because you don't want to look at the ugly spots, or B, because the ugly spots are the only things you can look at, either side of that spectrum. You can't focus, like I said, you gotta be balanced. I mean, if you're focusing on, I'm so great, oh Lord, it's hard, if you're looking at it like that, or if you're looking at it like, I'm just worthless, I'm a piece of crap, you gotta look at it all. You gotta look at it so clear.
absolutely, to find the balance there. Okay, we're gonna stop right there. I think that's a good stopping place, because there's some more to this I want to touch on. Does anybody have any questions so far?
I'm really glad we looked at that in the earlier, because I'm thinking to myself, man, I don't hate my mom, I don't hate my kids or my wife, so it makes a lot more sense now. So. Let's go ahead and worship. Once again, it's funny how, you're picking out songs, and that one worked, and then you hear the teaching, you go,